The Kirin Tour will tell you that mastering the magical arts is like learning the rules of a game. Fools, true power is taken by those brave enough to break boundaries. I am Medivh, the last guardian. If magic is a game, then it is one I play to win.
Welcome back, everybody, to the winter preliminaries for the Americas region. My name is Frodan, and we are getting ready for the last and 8th final spot here to go to a player for the Winter Championships happening in March. I'm joined by Raven and Kevin, and once again, we're going to bring you guys the action for this remaining best of 5. It's going to be a very exciting one. Let's talk a little bit about it and break down what's happened so far. Raven, what's been notable for the past 7 matches for you?
Yeah, I think overall it's just the good mix of the players. You know, we've seen some of the pros make it. Unfortunately, in the last game, we saw Admirable fall just at the last hurdle there, so that was unfortunate. But, you know, just a lot of these players get through, which has been really strong. And players from a lot of different regions as well, which I think probably just an overall surprise from a lot of players. But, yeah, just a good overall performance from everyone.
Certainly. I think anybody at this stage, it's definitely not through sheer chance that you've gotten to it. It showcased a lot of skill, a lot of thought and preparation for how these events actually are prepared for as well. Kevin, what's been your takeaway thus far?
I think the best part about it for me is after everything is said and done, we actually ended up with a very similar story to EU last weekend. There's a couple of notable players, people that we already knew, guys like Fibonacci, who have managed to excel in this tournament and find their way to the America's Winter Championship next month. But there's so many unknowns, so many new players who we didn't really know anything about going in. Everything from the young amnesiac to a tavern hero coming up from Buenos Aires. Those are all phenomenal stories, and I'm really excited that we got to be here and share that with everybody.
I think the big story in EU was that almost every player that was established and franchised was falling very early in the first 2 rounds. But I think NA definitely had a really good showing. It was clear that many of them were going very deep into the tournament. We saw Kit Kats, Chalky, and Admirable, 3 members from the same practice group, all go very far. 2 of them getting to the last final round before qualification. Ultimately, falling that short of the finish line is really painful, but they should be very proud of their accomplishments nonetheless. I'm really excited to see how it's going to pan out for the rest of the seasons as well. Like, not just winter, but spring, and ultimately summer into the fall championship.
Yeah, exactly, because the thing about this is not just like one singular tournament, and then, after the championships, that's what happens. This is actually going to continue on throughout the whole year. So for the guys who just fell short and for everyone who tried this time, they've got many more chances to do this. I'm sure a lot of them are already working on that for the next season.
They're guaranteed some money, but the big money is the ticket all the way to California. And we have 2 players from the very northern parts of the Americas region from Canada. That's Talion, who has his warrior band, and Coglorin from the Latin American region, who has his druid band. I'm okay with both these choices. It seems like Warlock, Warrior, Paladin, Shaman, Mage, those classes are definitely kind of in the middle of stuff. But whenever I see a druid band, I can definitely get behind that.
Yeah, and especially a druid band's something we've seen a lot where the person who's banned it has run mage, which a lot of the time we've seen pretty much predominantly freeze mage in the games that we've cast. So the druid band's just a sensible one there. It's one of your much harder matchups and really just narrows down the field to make your freeze mage much more better in the overall set.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think we've also seen kind of across the board, there's been a good spread as far as players who are using the very, very top end of the aggro styles in stuff like Shaman, which has been actually fairly successful for Chalky almost exclusively. Everyone else has really struggled, and Shaman actually has the worst win rate of any class in the tournament right now, right out to the far end of Control, using things like Freeze Mage, Control Warrior, and those decks have been, I think, the ones that have really showcased what's capable of winning a tournament of this caliber.
Definitely. I think the highest win rate by far has been Druid at about 67%. The lowest is Shaman's in the high 30s, which is pretty amusing to me because Shaman, whenever it was on stream, was actually succeeding very well thanks to players like Chalky, who actually didn't lose with Shaman. So if there's only a few people piloting Shaman to success and many people bring it but are not winning with it, I think there's more to that deck than just the surface. And I think that's a really good way to explain it because people always look at that Shaman and think, well, that's pretty relatively simple to navigate. I can do that. Except at this level, it's very easy to mess up or even bring the wrong cards and ultimately have a really losing proposition against a field that is very well prepared against you.
Yeah, exactly. And even, you think about playing Shaman on the ladder, which is something that a lot of players have done to a very high level, but it's very different when you bring it to a tournament because everyone's going to prep for that deck because it's one of the most popular ones, and especially when you can bring 4 decks, it really opens it up to the selections. We've seen like a good mixture of decks and classes overall and different archetypes within those classes. So, like you said, being able to play the Shaman at a high level is really paying off for players like Chucky.
And Shaman in specific is definitely one of the classes. We've talked about this all weekend where certain players have done a really great job of doing smart things in terms of tech choices to make different classes and different styles very efficient. Chalky had probably the most unique Shaman list of anybody in the tournament, and that's clearly a big part of why it was so successful for him.
Yeah, and even the way he prepped, it's something that probably doesn't really get talked about too often, but in terms of prepping and tracking win rates, everyone's like, okay, well, this deck has won X% of games, whereas he's like, the winning games with these cards in them. So this card has won X amount of games. And that's where we saw the Flametongue Totem, his explanation of this had the highest win rate as per card basis. And, we saw it do some work in one of the Freeze Mage matches, which pretty much gave him the win there.
Raven, I want to ask this question to you specifically. In the EU regionals, it seemed like the normal meta that everyone's come to expect, and I'm talking about a Druid, Paladin, Warlock lineup with maybe a Warrior supplanting it. That seemed to be the overwhelming reason why many of the people who qualified for it end up having in their lineups. You look at the players who qualified today, and I'm looking at Fibonacci, even Witty Bill, Chess Dude who brought the Priest and the Rogue, Chalky who brought Aggro Druid and all these other weird stuff with it. They're the ones succeeding. Why do you think such a big change and there's such a strong dichotomy between the results of NA and EU?
Yeah, I think although it may not be necessarily just region-based, it's the fact that because the EU tournament was first, I think a lot of the NA players watched that tournament. It's the same format, a massive selection of players. And we've seen that the guys who have prepped against the current base meta game decks have done really well, but if they can actually play those decks, the reason a lot of these players have brought just the standard decks is because they perform, whereas if you can just pinpoint the holes and actually, bank on that, then, you can really make the difference there, and definitely just reflective of the EU event and, reviewing that and going forward.
We talk about this all the time on the podcast, and in general, I think the biggest conversation when people are trying to decide how to be successful on ladder and in tournaments is, do you play the strong meta game decks, or do you bring something that counters those decks? And across the board this weekend, we saw very much an example of the latter. People who decided to bring something that countered what was going to be popular were the ones who were very successful.
Yeah, so, the level 2 ended up working out for a lot of these people, but I know a handful of people also thought the same in Europe. They brought a lineup that had Rogue, some Freeze Mage, some defensive control-y type decks, or even some other opportunity to have weird aggro decks to try to throw off people like Face Hunter, and it didn't really work out. But here today we have a very big mixture of classes. Really exciting to see how that ends up reflecting, especially towards the end of the season, leading up to Standard, because I think what's really unique is to watch people take others' ideas and really harp on it, right? We saw, for example, the Priest list from Chess Dude. That felt very reminiscent of Zetalot's list, of how he plays Control Priest, which people look to him as being one of the flagship pioneers of that class. Really want to see more of that, because I think when people kind of gravitate towards one idea, it's not perfect. I think we can definitely agree that Druid has weaknesses, even though it might feel like it's not in the case most of the time, but Druid definitely has his weaknesses. Secret Paladin has lost, I feel, more on stream than won games, and there's definitely counters to it, but people are exploring more of that idea the more we see this format.
Yeah, I think it's the difference between, you've got to start somewhere, right? So taking, for example, you said Zetalot, taking his Priest list, you've got a pretty good base, but then just tinkering with it and changing it, especially based on what you expect to see in a specific tournament. Because as I said, playing in this kind of tournament is very different than just laddering. So I think just, tinkering and, innovating and changing a few things, also adding the surprise factor for your opponent. So it's definitely worthwhile.
All right, so we are going to get ready for the first match. In the meantime, we're going to stop by with TJ and Brian Kibler on the other side of the tavern and check in with them before we get into our match of Coglorin versus Talion.
Thank you very much, Dan. And yes, once again, I'm standing by with Brian Kibler of Brian Kibler Gaming. You got it back. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I gave you the title back. But I just want to get your thoughts on the Hearthstone Championship Tour format as a whole. This is something new. It's something that we didn't see in 2015. There was just one big tournament at the end of the year. What are your thoughts after seeing almost 2 full weeks of preliminary now?
I think it does a couple of things very well. One is, as we've seen, it gives an opportunity for players who might not be as established, who may not have the opportunity to play in a lot of the major events in previous years, to really have an opportunity to have breakout performances. It also really lets competitive Hearthstone be a bigger thing throughout the year, because we have, rather than just one big world championship at the end of the year, we have championships through every season.
Yeah, and as many people that are watching know, you had enough points to actually participate. Can we expect to see any Brian Kibler in any of the big tournaments throughout the year, the spring championship or the summer championship?
I'm definitely going to be playing in some tournaments in the future. This event, I actually kind of accidentally got to enough points to play. I just happened to get top 25 legend in January.
Accidentally.
Oops. But I'd already committed to doing commentary for this, and I wanted to come and hang out and get a chance to watch things from the desk, and I've really enjoyed it so far.
Yeah, and looking forward, how do you think the new standard format is going to shake things up as far as the championship tour goes?
I think it's great. I think that what makes collectible games like Hearthstone so exciting and so fun is the dynamic nature of the sort of cards that are available, the decks that people play.
Yeah.
And a big shift, like a lot of major cards that are core features in decks going away and new cards coming in, that'll make the metagame a lot more diverse and a lot more interesting.
Yeah, all right. Well, thanks for talking to me for a little bit, Brian Kibler. It looks like we're almost ready to jump into the last match of the day. So we're going to send it back over to the desk. Dan, take it away.
Appreciate it, Brian and TJ, for a few words, just sharing their thoughts on the weekend as well as the format. And I couldn't really agree more with what Kibler said to wrap it up. I'm really excited for the future as well as the present. You really want to see how everybody's stories are really shaping up here. Whether you're a passionate fan of just Hearthstone in general, or you're even the more passionate fan from the Latin America region, they have some of the loudest and most exciting people to really meet. I mean, they're people who are super into the game a lot. Love to see them getting more into the scene and more opportunities to qualify for events.
Yeah, this is a really great thing, and Brian said it best. This is really great because we get to follow these players and their successes all year long. Last year, we kind of got to see what was going to come out as the year sort of wound up, and by August, we knew roughly what was going to happen for the Hearthstone World Championship and Last Call. This year, we get to just follow it all the way along. But it looks like we're going to jump straight into game number 1 here, guys. We're going to see Talion's Aggro Shaman going up against Coglorin's Patron Warrior.
Yeah, and this already looks like a much more, say, standard Aggro Shaman list, whereas we heard Chak in his interview talk about, he dropped the Ancestral Knowledge, he dropped 1 Lava Shock, so already, it might still have a few differences in, but this is looking pretty standard so far, but not the best opening hand, I would say.
No, certainly not. You want to have the minion pressure because all of these cards are great to help you in the mid stages of the game to close it out, or even the late. And when we say late stages of the game, it's like turn 5 or so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like turn
It's not
5,
that
sometimes even 4.
They grow up so fast, those aggro shamans. Before you know it, it's turn 5 and, they're out the door.
Yeah, done. Can't play that deck again. But it is, we've got Coglorin actually playing his Warrior now, so that's going to be pretty good. I think it's a pretty good matchup as long as you don't whiff too hard. I think the main issues here for the Warrior are going to be if a Totem Golem comes out early on, because there's no real easy way to deal with it without expending too many sort of key resources early on.
Right, and we know very specifically from some of the games we've already watched earlier today, Patron is heavily reliant on getting to that turn 5, turn 6 window where they can start to sort of put all the pieces together and really develop their own board. And as Frodan already sort of said, I mean, Aggro Shaman could very well be on its way out the door to go get a cup of coffee by that point, so...
Yeah, and this is actually looking really rough for the Warrior. There's no weapon at the moment, and, getting the Trog pretty much early on, and then going into, the potential of Totem Golem or the Flame Juggler, and then Argent Horse Rider or Feral Spirit to follow up. He's got all the options he could want here. This is a really strong start for the Shaman.
Yeah, I think the Shaman not having this Totem Golem answered will be really annoying. It kind of gets answered in a sense that you play the Unstable Ghoul and you have a plan over 2 turns, but now that you have Deathbite, is that even the plan you want to go with?
It's tough to
Deathbite does
say.
answer it.
Yeah, it is tough to say. In a position like this, I think one of the things that's actually going to end up being very important is that Talion is on the coin and can make up for his overload that way and get these Feral Spirits out. And it is actually very difficult as a Patron player to answer a board that has a lot of things happening all at the same time. because you're looking to remove targets one at a time with a weapon until you get to a point where you can actually utilize patrons and the whirlwind effects.
Yeah, and what we're doing now is we've seen the Frail Spirit, probably one of the worst cards that could have come out for Coglorin, where he could have equipped the War Axe previously, and now he's using that Despite, which is really key as the weapon that will deal with the Totem Golem. Actually just clear up minions with 3 health. That's going to be a little bit frustrating, and he doesn't actually have an Execute or anything to follow up with, so killing this Feral Spirit next turn and then executing the Golem.
It is important to note, though, that Coglorin has Loatheb available to him, and Shaman, as a general rule, relies on spells to create the additional pressure to end the game. That's how they get their burn. So Loatheb is often really useful for that.
Yeah, and that was pretty huge, though. Getting the Inner Rage is massive here, especially after already using one, I believe. Did he already use one?
He
I
had
think
to
he
use
used
it
it
as
early on,
removal on
right?
the Trog, yeah.
So this is huge. So now, like, the game might actually swing the other way, just because, you know, Shaman doesn't normally have the ability to deal with the patrons. A lot of the answers is just ignore them and kill your opponent. And Coglorin now, I think he will just have to just go for it and just ignore the patrons, pretend they don't exist, and just go good old face.
Let's see how much damage he has. If you count all of it at its minimum damage, you have 15 from the hand, plus the 5 on board. So if you roll even high on the Crackle, who knows? Maybe you can accelerate your turn kill by 1 more turn. That's never on the higher side. 5 is not the max, but pretty dang good. And I like the plan of being really aggressive. However, 1 Armor Smith can change a lot.
I mean, even that Dread Corsair isn't awful. He's going to be able to put 2 taunt minions down. He's going to be able to more or less get control of this board back. There's going to be a lot of patrons up. It may only buy him 1 turn, but that 1 turn could be the critical turn where he can get either an Armor Smith or some additional answers available to him just to stay in the game.
Yeah, the problem he's got, though, is if he plays both taunts, he's dead because he can't armor up. Oh, yeah, he's dead, so because he can Lava Burst and Lava Shock next turn, right?
Yes, he can Lava Shock first and Lava Burst.
And then if he doesn't play double taunts, then the minions just push through damage. Unless he uses all the minions to clear, which is going to be, you know, which isn't going to, you know, it might keep him alive 1 more turn, but, you know, with the Shaman still on 30 health, it's not looking too great at this moment in time.
I wonder if he's aware of this and he's going to choose to Loatheb here specifically because it's the only way to stay alive. But it looks like he may gamble on 9 being enough and trying to buy 1 more turn that way.
I think it's okay to play this taunt and armor up. You want to not miss the opportunity to heal as much as you can. Next turn you can Loatheb and play the
Oh,
shield.
wow.
That's enough. That's lethal. You should be able to Lava Shock and then unlock the 1 remaining crystal.
And
so that's a quick 1-0.
It was turn 6, though, not quite turn 5.
Yeah,
so this one, you know, took a little bit longer.
Slightly a late bloomer. It's okay.
Happens to everybody, even those super seniors. That's a very quick game number 1. And Talion strikes onto the board. Coglorin ends up losing with the patron, but it's game number 1 only. I think, in all things considered, there was just too much of that early game. It was the exact opposite of the hand that he was having in the first stages. It was just all burn, no minions, and then he got a lot of his base of his minions. You see how impactful Totem Golem with Feral Spirits does early game.
Yeah, I think that was the real key there, because it just made Totem Golem really difficult to deal with. He held off on 1 turn to be able to Despite, but then had to run it into 2 taunts whilst the Golem's still doing damage, and he just run away with the game from there. And I think having the minions that early and then drawing straight into the burst was pretty insane.
Being on coin just ended up deciding that game. The ability to coin out that Feral Spirit actually was the difference between whether or not we were going to see Talion be able to end early using Shaman versus maybe giving Coglorin even 1 or 2 more turns to sort of fight his way back, because Patron could honestly do 15, 18 damage a turn very easily once that patron-heavy board is established.
Yeah, there's even a potential after the patrons for, even if there was an Armor Smith and a Whirlwind to come out, you know, the health gain might have been enough to just push him out of that range immediately, at least.
Well, if the patron loses, it still has a chance to pick up a win, I think, against the mage, just because I know that patron warriors these days, assuming you're strong enough that you've practiced it a lot, it still feels very good against Freeze Mage. I know some people used to put it at a better matchup odds, but I still think it's pretty good. I don't know what you think, Raven.
Yeah, I think you have to, I mean, there's 2 ways to play it. I think anyone who, if they try and play it aggressive, it just doesn't really work out a lot of the time unless the mage really whiffs on the hand. But I think if you really have to try and just do that big turn with, say, double Armor Smith, double Whirlwind, and then literally just say, I'm going to have more health than you can just actually, you know, any damage you can give me. But it is definitely a lot harder than it used to be, just because you don't really have the burst threat that deck used to have.
Well, we have Paladin versus Warlock, not the matchups that we were expecting, and it's just entire pivot. That's what Conquest is. It's blind pick every single game. You can choose whatever classes remain as long as it's not a class you won with. And now we have this Paladin deck with a pretty monstrous curve. A coin into turn 2 Knife Juggler, followed by another Knife Juggler in Muster for Battle can be absolutely disgusting if Talion can answer it. He does have a Dark Peddler though, so maybe that's something to stop at early game aggression.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for Talion. It depends on what else he's able to pick up and what he gets for choices from that Dark Peddler. On the whole here, I'm actually really excited to see Coglorin pivot away, like you said, from the Patron and choose an alternate matchup. That hasn't been something we've seen a lot of strategically over the course of the weekend. Most players have chosen to sort of pick the lineup they want to run and then pick the order they want to run it in and largely stick to that battle plan. So this is a really, I think, interesting decision on his part, and it's going to make for a more interesting series because he does actually get a pretty decent matchup here.
Yeah, I think Coglorin's got a really strong start, but Talion has like 2 of the key cards in this matchup, I believe. With having Reno just ready to go is pretty good, and then more importantly, the Hellfire to clear the board down from the early build-up. Because the way the Paladin normally wins this matchup is they build up the board so much by, say, turn 6, pressure the Warlock enough to almost have to Reno or do some form of awkward like healing turn. And then the healing doesn't matter anymore because they just catch up again with all the damage, whereas Talion can actually go Hellfire a bit early on to clear what's down. So, we can see the Juggler's going to come down, potentially the Muster, and then follow up later with Reno.
Oh no, one knife missed. But it does land the second one, a sigh of relief for Coglorin. That would have been a pretty bad 25% chance miss there. But Talion is the one who's probably breathing heavy right now. He only has this Gadget Sand Jouster to fend off a Knife Juggler with more ammo coming up.
That's definitely not what he wanted to see out of that Peddler. And this is a matchup where Reno is going to be powerful, but perhaps less powerful than some of the matchups where you rely on Reno to recover from burn damage and spells. In this instance, Reno is going to be great, but has to be paired with some kind of board clear because Paladin develops such a scary board, and this is an insane hand. Coglorin could not have asked for a better set of tools right now.
Yeah, this is a little bit crazy though, because by doing the juggles, he does guard the board. It's the right play. I'm pretty sure you just don't not muster here, but he's going to get locked down pretty hard by the Hellfire. And this is what I was saying earlier, where the Hellfire is going to be so strong in just removing that early start that Paladins are known for, and just to build up that board. And then he does have Reno, so if you can keep the board just empty, Reno reset the game, then suddenly Paladin starts top decking cards like Creeper and a mini bot. They're much less dangerous when you get into turn like 8 and 9. Whereas the top decks from the Reno lock are obviously much more powerful on their own.
But look at how fast Coglorin is going to redevelop that board. The only other meaningful clears in this Reno lock style are Demon Wrath, which is okay against the Paladin, and potentially Twisting Nether, where Coglorin right now is going to end up with 5-6 minions on the board again here over the course of the next 2 turns, depending on what he draws and what choices he makes. He's going to be threatening a lot of damage, not enough to kill Talion outright, but Reno's going to have to get played. He's not going to have the ability to sit back and decide to use it later on.
Yeah, but in them, if you look at Talion's actual deck, he has, he does have the Doomsayer, which is a board clear, although not as reliable, and there's also potential for a Shadow Flame as well. So there are still options there, and Lotheb's going to just, at this point, just be a good body on the board there, and just, be able to trade away and just build up to, challenge what's on the board, so Reno's a lot safer next turn if he feels he needs to play it.
Yeah, don't forget Talion has that weird Kazan Mystic in the deck with was it him also playing Sacrificial Pact? I do think we saw it the previous series. That was the one who played it. It was admirable. But there are odd inclusions indeed, so you have to be careful about that if you're Coglorin, because you know about that for sure. Keeper Voldemort seems to be the most reasonable to just keep your board as flexible as possible. You've seen that your opponent played Hellfire, so you're just less afraid of area of effect cards. And I like this push. You set up a potential win next turn if your opponent can't answer it.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is what you have to do in this matchup. You have to be aggressive as the Paladin, and just a lot of the time, if you get into this health, you do keep pushing, because if they don't have Reno, there's normally nothing great they can do. And even if a heal bot comes down, well, that's the whole turn. We do see Reno get dropped, and that's going to be a heal all the way back up to 30. And two pretty beefy bodies on the board there. So Mysterious Challenger not coming down before the Reno was actually pretty good for Talion.
On the other hand, though, looking at this from Coglorin's perspective, it's not like he expended a huge amount of resources to move the needle and get the game to this point. It cost him a couple of early game minions and a couple of early game spells to push his opponent to 8 health, exhaust a board clear, and now he does have the ability to continue to push a lot of damage and likely, over the course of the next several turns, push Talion back to a fairly low health total.
Yeah, this is potentially okay depending on where the Avenge goes. So he's going to attack in. If the Avenge goes on the Mysterious Challenger, he can just straight up Siphon Soul it and get rid of it, and then kill off the 2-1 that's going to respawn from this Redemption proc now with the Mortal Coil.
The Redemption is actually in hand. He's going to be able to choose to play
I didn't see that
later on, and I think that's actually going to end up being very significant.
Yeah. And the Avenge there going on the worst target for Talion. He probably wanted it all just on that 6-6, so he can just clean it off pretty quickly with Siphon Soul.
Does he have any other option to deal with it, or is he just going to absorb this 12, maybe 14 damage because of Competitive Spirit? He chooses the Siphon Soul, which means Coglorin is pretty straightforward on his plays. Playing the Mysterious Challenger number 2, drawing whatever remaining secrets are in his deck.
Do you think he also plays the Redemption here to get one of these bodies back? Because it feels like he's going to be in a really good position here.
It feels like Secret Keeper is very good to diversify your assets for secrets. You know, if I was a secret stockbroker, I would say, you know, make sure to spread out your portfolio as best as you can. So that way Avenge can land onto 1-2 as well.
All right, guys. Frodan said it first. Buy, buy, buy if you have the option.
Actually, if you're a Secret Pound, I would sell, because pretty soon you're not going to be able to play it in the official championship tour in about 2 months.
Well, and they haven't shown very good results today. If this Secret Paladin wins for Coglorin, it'll be one of the most significant wins this deck has picked up all weekend.
Yeah, it's a very good point. At least for the matches where it mattered the most. Now, Secret Paladin has had about a 50% win rate, which in the context of the entire field is actually not bad. I think it's the second or the third highest win rate behind Rogue, which is a very interesting statistic as well.
And especially when you've got to consider, we've seen a lot of lineups that have been built to deal with Secret Paladins. So considering it's been like it's like Druid as well. Druid's had a quite high win rate. I think that's led to mainly due to the ability of being able to ban out any like super hard matchups. But Secret Paladin, you know, you can actually build a lineup that should just beat that deck. So I think the win rate from the Paladin has actually been pretty strong considering. But looking back at the game, Coglorin's actually slowly running into the position where his cards aren't doing as much. His hand isn't as powerful if you look at Talion's as well. So as long as he can keep hold of these minions on board, then he's going to be presenting a hell of a lot of damage. So he's really just got to use this to push. And
I think that's enough. He's got 14 on the board, and he just picked up the extra damage he needs. I think that's going to do it right now.
Yeah, it's just going to once again count to be extra sure. But that's exactly what you're looking for. You're thinking True Silver Champion. Oh, wait, this actually works too. So I'll just use the Consecration, which is another card that is always in and out of lists. I think Coglorin might be second-guessing himself right here, but just to once again count and be completely sure. I'd be very surprised if he didn't end up going for it, though, to say the least.
At this point, I think when you've done this much,
there
we take the time to just give it the extra 30 seconds, do that math 2 or 3 times just to be sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty scary just for a second as we all just went a little bit silent going, please. No! And then the second he Blessing of Kings to Secret Keeper, I was like, is he putting that on the minion to like trade? I was like, why wouldn't you go all in on one massive minion?
Right.
Like,
the whole point is you put it on Dr. Boom, or sorry, not Dr. Boom. You put it on the 7/7. And you hit the face with like a Dr. Boom power and just rock the board. That's what always the most satisfying to me.
Get the biggest shake on the board that you possibly can.
Yeah, that's how I personally like to end games, so I can forcefully assert dominance over my opponent.
Of course.
Yeah. So that wraps up Game 2. The series is tied, effectively setting into a best of 3. The Reno Warlock will still be available to be played, but the Secret Paladin gets a very big win here, especially, once again, like we said, if there's Freeze Mage on the list, that just strikes out another good matchup for it. But we'll see how things continue to develop. I mean, you don't have any guarantee whatsoever how the series will go. I do like Reno Warlocks, though. I feel like they're underrated by the community at large. They look at the Druid, which is very good against it. They look at Paladin, which gives Reno Lock fits. But outside of those, I think Reno Warlock still has its pocket in the metagame.
Yeah, I think when Reno Jackson first came out, everyone really dove on Reno Lock because it was one of the decks that was just very easy to make that legendary work, and it's very successful. But then when everyone started just going back to Zulus and then innovating on those a little bit, changing them about, and saw the power versus the current good meta decks, and yeah, everyone's jumped on that. But like you said, as long as you can dodge those lineups, then the Reno looks pretty good against everything else, right?
Yeah, it's true. If you think about what the third most popular or even the fourth most popular classes are, it's usually Warrior, the aggressive Shamans, even the Zoo to a certain extent. Reno Warlock can actually have a very strong case against them, giving it an actual ability to make it a strong third deck. Not to mention, it's not impossible to win against some of those decks, right? It's not like 100% loss against it. So who knows? Maybe it performs a lot better than you expect.
The challenge really with Reno Lock more than anything is just consistency. Giving up all of those duplicate cards and not being able to get really strong mulligans, really consistent gameplay means you do have to sort of make some judgment calls with all of your core cards because you only get to play them once. And in this position, I think Talion's going to have a really good start. We now obviously know a little more about this deck in that he's probably trying to run the Arcane Golem and a Faceless Manipulator as his finisher, which is going to be a lot of damage that as the Patron Warrior on the other side, you don't really have a good response to.
Yeah, I think in this matchup specifically, because it's the Patron plays going to try and make patrons, even though against Warlock a lot of the time it's, you just presume they have AoE. But I think Talion's just going to be super focused on being able to just clear the patron board. And, we saw in a few games yesterday as well where we saw a Faceless Manipulator be used, I think on a Mysterious Challenger, just to, keep the board big because he didn't have the other piece of the combo ready, and it was more about survival than actually trying to combo out your opponent. But if he does have it, it's definitely going to be a surprise for the Warrior.
Well, Warrior gets what he wants early on, which is weapons. Now, having draw and other minions to combine with the weapons, like the Acolyte and Deathbite, is pretty huge. Over on Talion's side, well, Talion looked like he had some early games, but I think did he even throw away Mortal Coil early on so that he can get more minion base? I like that decision. That's a very small, subtle thing that might go over people's heads, but you don't really have much application for those 1/1s.
No.
Sorry, those Mortal Coils, because there's not a lot of 1/1s.
Yeah, he chose very actively to mulligan away sort of utility cards and spells in favor of, I want to be able to develop a board. And now you can actually see he has a totally perfect curve in hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like he's playing a really, really great game of poker right now.
Yeah, and even before he
Or
drew,
Jin.
even before he drew into the Shredder, what we saw in terms of the minion was like pretty much typical of Reno Lock, right? Just a big spread of a wide variety of minions that all do pretty powerful in their own right.
Well, some decisions to be made from Talion's point of view. How is it best to deal with it? Do you play a minion and pass and let your opponent dictate the trades? The one thing that I'm most scared about is if my opponent can get really good battle rage. So if somehow able to get these minions drawing, those have a snowball chain effect. Those draws let you hit the whirlwinds to create patrons that much faster, more reliably. And without AoE, I'd be a little bit scared. What do you think is the best play here, Raven?
It's definitely a tough one. I was looking at the potential of getting the Shredder on board, but it just automatically dies versus what's there. And you have to deal with the minion afterwards that comes out. But I don't actually mind the tap here. There's not a lot of pressure on the board from Coglorin. Like you said, he is probably aiming to try and get more card draw first. And the Deathbite's going to be really nice here to clear up. But he does have like Twilight Drake, Shredder next turn, Lothar into Emperor. Like you were saying, Kevin, like he has such a strong curve of all minions. But he's probably getting to the point where he's like, yeah, maybe I do want to see some of these spells. Like the more you edge towards turn 5, especially after seeing the Deathbite, probably really want to see that Hellfire pretty soon.
Right. The challenge at this point is that we know there's about to be a very, very substantial patron turn, and getting multiple draws off that Acolyte of Pain is also super nice. The Battle Rage off the top, also really, really, really important in this matchup. So if you're Talion, I mean, you can do a lot. You can take control of the board in some respect. You can put down some sticky minions that are hard to remove, but you're not going to be able to actually stop your opponent from making a big play in the next turn or two.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out how worth it would be to actually play that Elven Archer first.
I was thinking about it too.
Because it just removes a Whirlwind effect off the board before Patron, right?
Right.
So it might have been worthwhile there because it clears the board actually. So the board would then just become the Patron, and you could still get the Twilight Drake out.
Well, this Drake doesn't die if Coglorin decides to go for a patron turn here, so I don't know that he's going to make that decision. He's probably going to look either at the Battle Rage, maybe even at the Monkey, just as a way to develop the board and buy himself another turn, maybe fish for some more cards, because he's going to get a really great patron turn at some point here when he decides he's ready. I actually really like Battle Rage here.
The thing about this matchup, though, is the longer you go into the game, the further the Warlock taps into his deck to potentially draw into an AoE to clear the patrons.
Yep.
Therefore, I'm of the boat and believe that you should try to get patrons as fast as possible.
And I think the key reason here as well for, I agree, because he doesn't have Inner Rage. So if he loses this ghoul, which like he might now do this turn with the Elven Archer, if he loses the ghoul, then suddenly he's going to make 2 patrons on the board, which Warlock can deal with without much AoE, just play a minion, maybe a Dark Bomb or something like that. And then it becomes much more of a problem, whereas I think there was definitely opportunity to just go all in there with the double whirlwind effect and really push for a lot of patrons.
Yeah, that was a respect kill. I completely respect the fact that this Drake is probably the biggest threat that I'll have to deal with for the next coming turns. In terms of just 9 health, like how many more minions have more health than that? Not many in Hearthstone, let alone the deck. So I like killing it off. I can understand why he didn't feel like comfortable going to Patient because he didn't have Inner Rage or Whirlwind. Plus, he might pick it up the following turn.
And there's also potential for like a Shadow Flame as well. So he couldn't kill the Drake, and then if he attacked in or got Shadow Flame, then all your patrons are dead regardless.
Sure.
Yeah, Talion has just a ton of options here. He's got a very well-developed hand and just tons of choices to make. I am actually a little astonished that he's still just holding on to that coin, because I keep thinking he's going to try and use it to squeeze out, for example, that turn an early Emperor Thaurissan to get so much value off of it.
Yeah, I mean, you gain a lot of value, which is great, but I think when it never feels great when you play like a single minion onto the board when Deathbite just clears it up straight away. I think you want to create more awkward situations for your opponent, like this one, where he sort of just gains a turn or he just loses his monkey. So it's I don't mind this at all. And then coin's going to help it a lot when Emperor is played, and then you can just do even more in the turn.
With both patrons in hand here and a follow-up Deathbite available, do you gamble on the possibility that there's no removal in your opponent's hand, no AoE board clear, and start building patrons?
I think you have to do it at some point, right? Because the problem is if you just never commit because you think they might have AoE, then they may as well have the AoE. You can't just play with 2 cards down in your deck. So I think you definitely have to commit to it at some point. But now he's not got the second Whirlwind effect or the Inner Rage, so maybe he's going to try and hit in, clear, and then Battle Rage looks pretty good just to cycle even more, maybe get that Inner Rage, and maybe draw into the second Execute as well.
But we just have to see what comes off the top with this Battle Rage.
Okay cards, not the best. I think the cards you really want are the other ones that help you get more patrons, or for the big threats that will follow up, like a Dr. Boom or Grommash potentially to finish. This is a pretty tame board to play a big threat on. He's going for a coin Dr. Boom, and I anticipate that he's saving Emperor Thaurissan for something else, potentially any combo pieces that would make his life a lot easier.
Oh, wow. This is a real opportunity here. If he decides he's going to clear Dr. Boom, he's going to have the ability here now to take advantage of a decent ability to build patrons using those boom bots later on.
So this is interesting. Now he picks up the Grommash Hellscream, which is with the weapon 18 damage plus the 4 on board. I mean, it's definitely optimistic.
Are you down for going face here, Dan? Just go Deathbite face and settle for Grom in a Rage next turn?
Probably not face. I'd probably kill the Boom somehow. Still, just because I don't want to get punished by not killing it, right? Even though there's not many taunts in the deck, there's still ways that you can get really punished for leaving it up.
Sure, yeah. I was just trying to be Rob, just to, push that smoke. He's not around, so I'm going to try and fill in the best I can for him.
Yeah, I'm definitely behind killing the Boom. However, I do recognize the value of going for the face attack. You do lose, quote, 15 damage, or sorry, 5 damage, but that's not always as clean as that. Your opponent could have any taunt, any heal, Reno Jackson itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely the point at which, if you're Talion, you know that behind this, there's going to be patrons. You're at a point where the patron player is like halfway through their deck. They've been consistently setting up the tools necessary to make patron plays happen. You have to be concerned about it. You can't sit back and play around it. He needs to start to develop threats of his own. I really, really like this Lotheb, actually.
Yeah, the Lotheb just pretty much blocks out any real chance of a big board of patrons coming down. We do see a second monkey as well, so, the monkey, another interesting card in Patron, not something that's super common, actually.
I think you can take this turn to develop the Pilot Shredder to extend your range of potentially killing your opponent. You're at the point where you have Grommash and the Inner Rage, and that's usually a combination that people don't think about. They think about the Death Spite and the Grommash for 14, but they are really thinking about the 16th damage point with the Inner Rage. And if you can get Pilot Shredder down proactively, it has a higher chance of stick. So I like that, I guess because there's nothing else better to do. The Monkey comes out too, which is a very crude way to treat that awesome manly card. But, you know, I personally think that this is a really good move here.
Yeah, and Talion just no really great options here. He hasn't run into any really good single target removal. He's always had the option to set up a really nice Emperor Thorson, but in some ways now it's too late. If he's playing really heads up and thinking about the Grom combo, he honestly has to probably utilize his anti-Keelbot here.
Yeah, I think it's okay to say Dart Bomb the Shredder first.
Sure.
Just to see what comes out, because that will really just change your turn, depending if it's one of the really swingy 2-drops.
I agree.
So if you can Dart Bomb that first, you know that the Lotheb can kill off the 3-4 and still live and still be a threat on the board. Because just as much as the Warlock is getting towards a little bit low, so is the Warrior. So the Dart Bomb is going to come down and... okay. That's
still enough.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's actually a little bit annoying.
Potential lethal. If he plays just Emperor or Sylvanas here, that's game. And it's such a big trap, too, because I think this doesn't make sense to necessarily play Emperor or to play the heal bot in this position.
But you really want to play something like Sylvanas, right? Or
I think you want to play Emperor because of your hand. And
yeah, that's
given
true.
the context, I don't blame him, but that's another game where he plays directly into the range of what Coglorin has. Exactly those cards.
We've seen this time and time again with Grom. People just keep forgetting about exactly how much burst potential exists if you don't do the math around the big push from that massive minion.
Yeah, I think one of the problems here is that, like, you know, Talion shouldn't be too disappointed with that play, I don't think. I think, like, he's already seen one Inner Rage, and to have Grom Inner Rage as well come out, you know, it's a little bit rough, whereas if you played Healbot on 19 and just putting a 3-3 on the board is pretty much your whole turn after that Dart Bomb.
Sure.
So I don't think it was too terrible, because that's a very, you know, anti-tempo turn, right? You're not really doing anything on the board, so I don't mind the turn at all. It's just unfortunate for him that the combo was there.
It's unfortunate, but that's what it takes to be the winner here. I think in a lot of scenarios, people are talking about the highest percentage plays, and we harp on it a lot. Like, hey, more times than not, that Thorson was probably the right play there to get the ability to sweep the hand. But given hand context, given how the games are playing out, you also have to make the next level in a lot of these plays, which is reading your opponent, reading what they can do, shutting off the ability to do it. And you see players like Amnesiac do this. This is what he was doing earlier on, saying, I'm in a pretty good position if I can drag out this game, you know, because he finally had AoE, he finally had some really good powerful cards, but what can I do to the next step to ensure that my win percentage stay as high as possible without me compromising to potentially lose? These are the type of scenarios that are very difficult to factor in, and what ultimately separates some players from winning these small marginal gains that puts them over the top of the series.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're sitting here with perfect information. We can see both players' decks, both players' hands. We know everything. As the player in that circumstance, you're making a judgment call, and Brian talks about this all the time, actually, about how when you're choosing the play you want to make, there's a choice between the play that delays the game and lets you stay in the game for one more turn, and the play that most advances your win condition. And at some point, you have to flip that switch and say, okay, I can't play stay alive forever. I'm now going to play try to win.
Right.
And that's exactly what Talion was doing.
However, with his deck, you have to understand that I think if you drag out the game, you're still in a pretty good spot. Patron does run out of opportunities to kill you outside that Grommash. Whatever, it's in the past. You have to kind of move on.
Stop living in the past, Dan.
That's quite the meme. Yesterday we were making a lot of jokes about everything is technically in the past, so you just forget about it. But if you're Talion, that is your mantra right now. You just have to move on. You're down 1-2. Sure, you played directly into the lethal opportunity, but I don't think that you could have avoided it given what you were doing. Coglorin's going to go for the Zoo versus the Freeze Mage here. And that's going to be a tough matchup, again, on paper, but we've seen Zoo beat the Freeze Mage multiple times today.
Yeah, it's one of those funny matchups where, you know, if you would discuss it with a group of players, you'd be like, yeah, of course, Freeze Mage should just win most of the time. But when it comes to actually playing the deck, we've seen all weekend that Zoo has been pulling out wins against Freeze Mage, which has been pretty crazy and something I've enjoyed quite a lot, actually.
Well, Zoo is one of those decks, and I think we've seen success with all kinds of decks this weekend, with Druid, with Patron Warrior, not so much, with Secret Paladin, and absolutely with Zoo, where sometimes you're just able to overwhelm your opponent. You're able to curve out very efficiently, do a lot of damage, and build a board that can't be answered. And in a situation like this, the Zoo player has a really great start, an explosive opportunity to get lots of damage on the board, get a lot of work done. Wow.
Whoa.
So nice to pick up a Mortal Coil there. But yeah, Zoo absolutely has the ability to push damage before Freeze Mage can start and try to stall the game to work towards their own win condition.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just going to comment on Coglorin's hand. The egg is really nice, even to hold in hand sometimes versus Freeze Mage, because you wait till they do the Frost Nova Doomsayer turn, throw the egg down, and then you start your turn with a 4/4 when they think they've got guaranteed AoE clear, and then going straight into an Ironbeak Owl, just yet another good way to deal with the Doomsayer Frost Nova. That's actually one of the key interactions in these two decks.
Talion doesn't like the look of his hand. I don't either. He's going to try to draw cards, but accepting that he'll take 3 extra damage, perhaps over course of 2 turns, because there's bigger threats besides that Flame Imp. And that's the key of drawing a turn 1 play. That Flame Imp has been so valuable to many Zoos, taking games away from the Freeze Mage.
Yeah, it's absolutely a challenge when you're the Freeze Mage and you can't, for example, start early on in the game with something like a Mad Scientist. He's holding both Ice Blocks in hand already. He'll never get the opportunity to draw into one using a Mad Scientist. That's really painful and ultimately can be very expensive when you're trying to work on how do I stay in this game until I can stall my opponent out and take control of this board situation.
Yeah, and we can see this board is actually getting a little bit out of control now. This is ridiculous. So there's still 2 eggs ready to play. There's still an Owl to stop the Doomsayer, and there's an Argus to push for even more damage. So
unbelievable.
It's a little bit crazy. And as you said, with 2 Ice Blocks in hand, we've seen so many Freeze Mage games over the weekend, and so many games that have started with 1 to 2 secrets already in hand, which is pretty horrendous.
Would you consider dropping Doomsayer here?
Well, I think he has to. I mean, it was that or he has to start and think about playing a turn 5 Ice Block. And at the point where you're forced to do that, you're already so far behind, you're maybe wondering if it's worth continuing.
Yeah, I think the only argument for the other way is, though, you do have Cone of Cold, which is sort of like Frost Nova a bit. So next turn, you could have actually Cone of Cold and Doomsayer, which makes it much safer.
Is it worthwhile to
I
silence this
guess.
Doomsayer?
So many
Yes, absolutely. You want to preserve the board here. It's a really good question to ask because sometimes you feel like you can get to pass, but I think you're not only afraid of losing your board, but also on turn 6, your opponent will play Emperor Thorson if given the chance. You just don't want to give him that moment of opportunity.
Just to go crazy, he could push for 4 and just play both eggs. And just ignore the Doomsayer and have silence for the following turn.
It's true.
Do 4 damage, start the turn with 2 4/4s. That's pretty good, right?
Now you're starting to chain into the AoE turns with Blizzard into Flame Strikes, and I think that's when you want your eggs to actually survive.
Yeah.
And also you're pushing him to, dozen health. So I think this is pretty stable for Coglorin. Definitely worth arguing, but I agree with this.
I mean, the unfortunate thing for Talion here is we talk about AoE turns. There's no AoE. That lone Cone of Cold is going to allow him to stall, get 1 minion dead. He's going to have to choose very carefully what it is he wants to do with that, if that's how he chooses to play out this turn. But on the whole, I mean, pinging the Owl and Cone of Colding, yeah, it's going to buy you 1 turn, but he doesn't have Blizzard. He doesn't have Flame Strike. He doesn't have the ability to put down another Doomsayer. He's in a lot of trouble right now.
That's right. There's 7 damage on board with 12 health remaining, so just 1 Doom Guard could change it all. Coglorin, I don't think he has lethal.
No, I don't think he does.
He's slightly shy, but I mean, there's a lot of potential here. If you're Coglorin, honestly, this looks like an opportunity to tap, fish for something that might end the game, and if you don't see it, set up a sticky board that just lets you push as much damage as possible on future turns.
Yeah, this is pretty good. Playing the Argus now guarantees something buffed and that additional 2 damage, which is good versus like if you just played the Egg and the Juggler, well, yeah, you get a Juggle, but the Egg might not end up doing anything whatsoever. So I like this now. He has the Egg, and he can even, if he really wants to, like Egg Void Terror next turn or something. But this is so much pressure. We are going to see the Ice Block and the Cone of Cold probably, just to try and stem the tide here and really slow the game down. But the problem for Talion is he doesn't have that option where it's like, okay, I have like 3 turns where I can survive for.
Oh.
I can burst my opponent down.
Well, now you don't have to play Cone of Cold. You can play Ice Barrier instead, which is similar. Not exactly the same, but I mean, it's getting it out so you can stall without having to use your freeze. Your freeze is your preferable card to actually impact the board. So if you can get away with Ice Barrier being a replacement for freeze, like canceling out the attack, you're in a good spot.
Yeah, he's just trying to buy turns at this point. He's going to get a couple of extra turns out of these secrets. And Coglorin isn't drawing into anything that threatens to end the game. So at this point, Talion, I would say, has actually managed to stabilize. He's not going to be able to do a lot, but we're at the point where he can now Alexstrasza next turn, and he does have a little bit of burn in hand. If he were to top deck a Frostbolt, he'd be able to actually start and look at ending the game on his own terms, because Coglorin isn't going to be able to finish him off with the other Ice Block already available to him.
Yeah, I think the issue with that is that the Alexstrasza probably won't ever be able to attack the Warlock because there is another Defender of Argus on the board, so he would need some form of AoE to really claw himself back in this game. It could be a little bit rough. I think it's going to be it's a tough call whether he's got enough burst to just pressure enough through after this Alexstrasza, because I think we might just see the Alexstrasza used defensively.
I don't think he uses Alexstrasza defensively here at all. I mean, it's certainly an option, and it might be one that lets him sort of stay in the game because he is going to get the armor this turn. But I feel like he's basically at a point now where he has to think about what does it take to kill this Warlock player who can't heal, who can't stem any of my spell damage, who can't do anything to survive that pressure. If he gets a Frostbolt, the other Ice Lance, another Fireball, I think he has to think very seriously about the offensive Alexstrasza here.
But what if he doesn't?
That's the problem. There's only a Fireball and a Ping here that's going to do anything. So this is going to be really rough. And if he doesn't Alex now, which, yeah, you know, he could put the Ice Block, then his next turn of Alex and then Ice Lance at the moment, because he'll be on 9 mana. But with that 1 mana, you can't really do anything.
I do like the offensive Alexstrasza now that you have an Arcane Intellect, though, because you could draw into the lethal damage the following turn. It is possible. You would get a Frostbolt, and you have that opportunity to, because you have a second Ice Block.
Yeah, defensive Alexstrasza is 1 more turn, and at this point, 1 more turn I don't think makes a huge difference. That's enough damage. That Power Overwhelming off the top is enough damage to kill him outright from any point. He's going to pop this block. The other block is going to have to come into play next turn if he doesn't have lethal, but he is in a position where any top deck could end the game, and he can just play the other Ice Block and a Fireball, leaving his opponent at, I mean, Ice Block Fireball Ping would be, he's going to be down to 8 health. That's a position where he's not really safe if anything comes off the top. Any direct damage spell, and that game will be over.
Well, right now, if he picks up Frostbolt, he would have 14 damage, so he needs a little bit more, but he still has an opportunity to draw into it. And you can also ping over 2 turns with the Ice Block available to him.
Yeah, so that Arcane Intellect actually being like the key card, one of the only cards other than the direct burn itself that could have kept him in this game.
One thing to also consider is that if I am Coglorin, I would probably want to put the Knife Juggler out this turn, just because he might have some way to damage the board with Flame Strike and Stabilize. But if he does, there's a chance that he kills himself with the Knife Juggler activating. So I would definitely at least consider playing the Knife Juggler here.
I think at this stage, holding on to Knife Juggler when you've got you've still got, a few cards in hand. I don't know how much it actually does unless he wants to, if the board is completely wiped, and then try and just, ping it next turn and hope he doesn't have any more heals. So, there is merit for both of those options.
So he's going to have to Arcane Intellect here first and fish for his options before he makes the decision on the Ice Block. If he draws direct damage, he can end here. It just comes down to what these cards off the top are. Pyroblast is not exactly what I had in mind.
No, but Pyroblast is great if you can Fireball now. And assuming your opponent doesn't have Loatheb, or some way to heal that you're not anticipating, this game is yours.
Yeah, it's a question of 2 turns. It's always been a question of 2 turns. So I think at this point he has to just say, okay, Ice Block, Fireball, survive this turn, and unless something crazy happens in this next turn, this game is over, and we're going to go to a Game 5.
He could also tap for it, so don't feel like just because he didn't draw it, he doesn't have it. So, what's it going to be? Is he going to tap it all for the chance to go for Loatheb? Because I think he knows what's up here.
This is going to be tense. I think
he might just pass, though.
Yeah, I think you just hope that you don't have that quite 9 damage, and because there is Pyroblast is 1 card, but
7 is just too dangerous because of the Fireball range, also Frostbolt Ice Lance, so he goes for it, and Coglorin sees that his chances of this game are over. Freeze Mage, despite having awkward draws and a very good draw for the Zoo, you can see what happens if you just hit the Alexstrasza at the right time.
Yeah, that was crazy how close that game was actually. All looked very one-sided for quite a while, but I think the second you can just lock the board down for just a turn or so, and that Arcane Intellect just being the MVP there, I think.
Yeah, you could absolutely see the point. We said the point at which there was a stabilizing opportunity for Talion. He was able to find a way to keep himself in the game, and ultimately, although it felt kind of awkward at the start of the game, having both those ice blocks in hand was actually a very significant factor to whether or not he was able to go the distance and actually win with this deck.
I think it's it's a mixed bag there. So one of the things about Freeze Mage is you always have to play with what you have in your hand as a context thing. Like you can't always just say I'm going to set up Alexstrasza and kill my opponent. It's more of can I win if I still part ways with this burn? Can I control the state of the board if I give up this type of Frost Nova before I actually able to play anything else? Those are all really tough questions to answer, but I think he played that very well, all things considered, because it wasn't a very easy game at all from his point of view. Coglorin was the one just pressuring, and he's the one who was very straightforward plays. Like, I'm just going to play this, build the board. And Ty's the one who has to be like, oh gosh, do I use this now or do I save it? When do I play Thorson? He took a huge risk in potentially dying on that one turn playing Thorson.
Yeah, and especially when you talk of actual board pressure and pressure for the game itself. If he lost that game, he was done. So yeah, he handled that really well, and now we're going to end on a Warlock Mirror.
Yeah, that pressure is right back for him now because we're in Game 5, and whoever wins this is advancing to the America's Winter Championship, the last of the 8 players that will make that trip. So we have to see which of these styles of Warlock is going to be the one that can close it out.
I'm feeling the Reno Warlock, honestly. It's not set in stone at all in the sense that it's decided based off this opening hand, but in terms of how I feel the matchup flows, I definitely favor what Talion has compared to Coglorin. But at the same time, Zoo's a deck that can steal games from anybody because it's really strong at building the board, and it always has great stuff going on for it.
Yeah, and there are some drawbacks for the Reno Lock player. One of the things that you really rely on against board-heavy opponents is the ability to use something like Demon Wrath, which is not very effective against a Zoo Warlock because it doesn't deal damage to demons. So there are going to be certain minor drawbacks to this particular deck for Talion, but starting with Reno Jackson in hand is incredible for what he wants to accomplish.
Yeah, I think something the Zoolock has the potential to do as well is when you can stack those Power Overwhelmings or the Soulfire from the Dark Peddler, you can actually perform quite a lot of bursts that the Reno's probably... It's always difficult when you're on like a sort of mid-range amount of health and you don't really think Reno's worthwhile, but sometimes you feel you have to do it or you could die. So it's definitely going to be a tough one, and we did see that there's cards like Void Terror and obviously cards like the Egg, which can be quite high health minions, or Death Rattles, which survive the AoE.
Sure, and as the Zoo player, I mean, this is pretty much the dream opening hand. The ability to throw down these 2-drops, set up really, really efficient plays over the next couple of turns, do a lot of early game damage. It's obviously, we know, going to be countered by that Reno Jackson, but you get to build the board and dictate the pace of this game.
I mean, Reno Jackson is great, but he's not the end-all be-all to stop a deck like Zoo, just because with Zoo, you're more focused around building the board in general. There is a possibility that it saves you from dying, but if there's 15 plus damage back on the board, you're right back where you started. Oh, that's an awkward juggle.
This is a huge gamble.
Oh. Well, the Doomsayer does end up popping, but you at least get a 4/4.
I mean, that's an expensive turn. You lose a lot of board, a lot of opportunity, and obviously a very low chance of that outcome, but that's got to feel really good for Talion right now for what he's able to do in terms of fighting back into the game.
If he rolls a 4, I mean, he is so far ahead. And he's rolled a 2, so it's some poetic justice if you look at the grand scheme of how those outcomes.
Yeah, I don't blame Coglorin for making that play the previous turn actually, because he had 2 juggles to hit the Doomsayer once. Yep. So your odds on hitting it are pretty good there. So, and if you do hit it, you're very far ahead. So, and you do have to make these plays to win these matches.
Well, the chance of both of those missing is only 25%. At that point, statistically, the outcome should have worked out for him. And either way, honestly, he is still in a pretty attractive position. Having only seen a 2 on that implosion, he's actually not going to probably lose much of anything this turn. The Dark Bomb is probably going to have to come down. Oh, or we're just going to fight for board.
I mean, board is pretty much how this deck operates for Coglorin, so I don't blame him at all for it. Brand Bronzebeard is certainly an interesting proposition because you give up a 3-2 as opposed to a 2-2, and I'm okay with that. So I would like a life tap and a Brand Bronzebeard, especially when you drew that. You know you made the right decision because Brand Bronzebeard is not easy to deal with.
Yeah, he just swings onto the board, and he's going to offer a ton of burst potential if he can't be answered. And Talion, I mean, other than the Arcane Golem, doesn't have an answer.
Yeah, I mean, the only good thing here is he has drawn into Farseer, so depending on how threatened he feels at this moment, probably won't see the Farseer this turn because he does have Reno for next turn. But again, leaving Bran on board never feels great.
Right.
There's so much potential to do some like crazy things, even if it's just a peddler getting 2, 1 draws. It's actually really powerful.
It is true because it extends the range a lot, and Coglorin now can... Oh, well, it looks like he'd rather just go for a life tap immediately to improve his options. At first, I was looking at Defender of Argus play, but it looks like he just wants to be as aggressive as possible.
I mean, the silence into Defender of Argus was probably the play if you weren't trying to end the game. He doesn't know that Talion has Reno in hand, and at this point, I think Talion Reno's and is going to reset the state of the game a little bit, but this brand lives, and that's really significant because there's some very powerful Battlecry cards in Zoo.
Well, the one thing you don't want to do is to flame up yourself twice, but, I mean, that Defender of Argus is an absolutely nasty card.
My shield.
Or a really nice card, depending
Really
on
nice
depending on
card.
which side of the board you sat on there.
Well, I was just assuming from... I was assuming from the position, just like in general, just like how much it does onto the board is really, really disgusting. But at the same time, it's just like, this is pretty vulnerable to any kind of AoE the moment you pick it up.
Yeah, but Talion hasn't had really great luck with this deck drawing into his AoE because it is a one-off card. He's really looking for that singular Hellfire, and, I mean, Twisting Nether is a great choice, but he can't do anything with it this turn. So if you're in his position as the Reno lock here, your turn is a little bit awkward.
I think it's still okay, though. You're at 26 health, and you can still impact the board a little bit. It's not the end of the world.
Do you
if
actually
use
like
Siphon Soul.
Yeah, Siphon Soul Bran here, just to get it off the board. You can trade the 2-2 into the 6-2, and then you can. It means you can potentially hold on to that Twisting Nether instead of using it next turn, which is going to be pretty nice. But he does choose to tap into he does get Lotheb, and now I just feel the turn's going to be a lot less impactful. But I guess he's just going to rely on the Twisting Nether if anything's get too hairy.
Yeah, I think his backup plan was to Arcane Golem into Bran, if that was like the worst case scenario. Well, this is pretty funny, the fact that Doomguard has double Battle Cry.
Be moderately problematic right now.
Yeah. But he chooses to life tap, and this is an interesting thing too. Coglorin is definitely hedging his bets against massive AoE. He knows turn 8 is a possible Twisting Nether, so he chooses to be a little bit more conservative. Do not blame him whatsoever. If he wants to play the Flame Imp, he should trade off the Brand Bronzebeard first, and he doesn't have any more Battle Cries.
We've seen this happen on a pretty consistent basis over the course of the entire weekend, where Zoo players end up overcommitting to the board, and it does end up punishing them on some level. This is about the extent of what Coglorin could have put on the board there, and there's really no reason not to put this Twisting Nether down this turn.
Well, you also have an opportunity to develop other stuff, but I agree, it's the most expensive card, so you're not going to have many chances to play Twisting Nether in the future. That kind of works because you can silence your own minion. But if that target was not something you wanted to silence, you'd probably just pitch it and tap.
I guess there's really nothing that you're holding on to an Iron Beak Owl for against a Reno lock. There's not a lot of targets where you're going to get an active silence opportunity, and this basically puts Talion on notice because Reno's already gone. There's not a lot of other healing effects left in this deck, and there's a lot of damage on this board.
Oh, I thought they had 10 mana.
You ready for the Sylvanas Shadow Flame?
That would have been game ending right there. The debate is whether or not Coglorin felt like he wanted to life tap after he played his Doomguard. If he felt like another card that he wanted to get deeper into his deck is better than the Owl being on board, I would consider doing it, just because I don't think it's particularly very strong to have an Owl on the board. But at the same time, I don't think he really wants to take that chance of like life tapping something very awkward and not having the Owl on the board.
Yeah, I didn't mind the Owl at all. There's not too much you're waiting for. You've seen Reno, so you just put as much power as possible on the board and then just hope you can just push through, because now he's seen Reno, he's seen Farseer, he's seen the Twisting Nether. You know, you just hit the point where like, right, you know, you've got to be running out of things that are going to slow me down enough not be able to close this game.
I mean, Shadow Flame and Demon Wrath are the only AoE removals left, and Talion doesn't have any more healing effects. There might be one heal bot in this deck still, but this is the point at which if you are the Reno Walk player, you're basically only doing something turn to turn by allowing your opponent to life tap themselves down. That's how this game has stayed as even as it is.
Yeah, and this is going to be really interesting because a play you can make here is you can play the Arcane Golem, charge it into the 1/2, and then Shadow Flame it to just clear off the board. But because both plays are fairly low, and you do have Arcane Golem, so then if you draw Faceless, then suddenly that's a decent chunk of damage. But I think clearing the board is actually good here because Zoo's top decks are going to be a lot less impactful as yours. Oh, he's just going to clear the Spider and play Sylvanas. Okay, that's pretty reasonable.
So I think Sylvanas challenges with the next Shadow Flame.
Yeah, Shadow Flame is a card that you really have to hold on to, and Coglorin, for better or for worse, has demonstrated he's willing to commit heavily to the board. This is an opportunity for Talion to really get an edge in this game if he gets a big Shadow Flame off next turn.
Soulfire or Power Overwhelming would be so significant here, just because you don't have the way to actually finish the game that much. He's got 4 damage on board, and it's going to be pumped to 6. Oh, sorry, 5. It's going to pump to 7. And right now he has 11 damage. I don't also mind going all in here, because I don't know if you have the guarantee of playing a minion or not. Especially if you pick up Doomguard as your last card, you could regret everything.
Oh, but the heal bot off the top, that's such a huge swing. Talion's going to be able to almost clear the board, get the heal bot down, and that is going to take him out of range of a 1-turn kill unless there's a really, really good life tap draw for Coglorin.
No, you're absolutely right. Because the Sylvanas was played second, it's going to steal the Spectral Spider off of the Haunted Creeper as opposed to just clear the board immediately. And that will give Talion some breathing room. That heal bot, like you said, was a very important draw, because if it was just like a big game hunter, then he'd be at the mercy of playing either Demon Wrath right afterwards or risking dying to like whatever gets top decked at that point.
And I think at this point, you just don't want to take... Oh, maybe he does want to take this risk. I think this is a really scary proposition. At the health point he's at, I don't know that I would be making exactly this choice.
He's just going for the highest chance he thinks he can win. Oh, this is actually much better than if he realizes that his opponent doesn't have Abusive Sergeant. 2 power overwhelmings.
That hurts.
And a Haunted Creeper.
Creeper's big, though.
Kind of does. I mean, it's like one of those things where it's 8 damage, and it comes down to whether or not he can draw damage. Hellfire does end up being it. Talion's going to the championships.
What an incredible, incredible top deck. That's exactly what he needed, and that was an incredibly back-and-forth series, and means we get another Canadian at the North American Winter Championships.
Yeah, job well done, and another dream crushed at the same time. That is ultimately what this match meant for both these players. Coglorin played pretty well to get to this point, but unfortunately he fell a little bit short. Definitely has to go back and reevaluate how everything went through, because it felt like there were some winnable moments on both sides there. I think Talion knew that he threw away some games, but I think he played so well in some of those matches where he got very bad hands. Really proud of how he was able to navigate through some of the toughest moments there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to just go back and watch that whole set again at some point, just because the matches were each one felt really close. There was nothing, and just the back and 2 taking them to 2-2, and then that last game was just on a knife's edge almost every single turn towards the late game.
Yeah, basically, when all was said and done there, we actually have had a couple of series now towards the latter half of the day today where things went to that 5th game, and every game felt tense. There was never really just an absolute blowout. There's a couple of games that were quick, but games were not decisive. Games very much, it was kind of they're back and forth, one player or the other stabilized, and now we're looking at a bunch of players who had to really work to earn their place at the Winter Championship.
That's right. So it's a player from Canada this time around, which is a pretty strong country. Last time I checked, they had the top 2 players from the Americas Championship last year in purple as well as hot form. And then they end up going all the way to the finals. At least hot form did, and placing second in BlizzCon. A job well done to all of our players. That's 8 players that we have joining us in the Winter Championships. And we're done. We've gotten all the way here. What's it feel like to be here at the end, Kevin? Your journey has been really fun so far having you.
The entire experience was incredible. It was a real pleasure to work with all of you guys and everybody who's not on stream right now. Cora, Brian, everybody just did a phenomenal job this weekend. Poor Rob, who's at home sick, and I hope he feels better soon. And for everybody at home, I hope we put on a really great show and that you guys had a really good time. And we will see you March 11th to 13th for the America's Winter Championship.
That's right. Raven, any last words for you?
Yeah, just, mirroring what you said, really. It was really good for me, first time over in America, which is brilliant, and to cast this tournament is great, and kind of cool as well, because I think you're the only person I've cast with before out of everyone who's here, Dan, so kind of cool to cast with a bunch of new people I've not cast with before, so yeah, a lot of fun overall.
That's great. You did a wonderful job, buddy. And I think everybody also did a great job. A big shout out to everybody who's been helping us to get to this point, whether you're a viewer or an admin or a person that's been helping us with production. We appreciate all the effort that's made this Winter Championships possible. And so to wrap it up, we're going to send it over to TJ with a winner's interview, as well as some final words on the broadcast.
Thank you very much, Dan and gentlemen on the desk. Yeah, what an incredible match to finish up the day. A little bit unfortunate for Coglorin, who was actually this close to qualifying for the Americas Championship last year, but fell short. But a big congratulations to Talion, who took the victory and will be going on to the Americas Championship. I'm actually standing by with Talion, who agreed to do a winner's interview. Talion, can you hear me?
Hi, TJ. I can hear you just fine.
Hey, man, first off, big congratulations. I know it's probably been a really long, stressful day, but how do you feel now that you've qualified for the championship?
Oh, man, I feel so relieved. Earlier in my first match, I was just really, really nervous. Just totally out of my comfort zone. But now I'm really just relieved to be able to make it to the top 8 of this event.
Yeah, it was a great run by you. I was really impressed by your deck choices and your play throughout the day. You're a little bit more of an unknown player, I'm sure, to most of the Hearthstone community. Talk to me a little bit about your background in Hearthstone and how you qualified for the Winter Preliminary.
Right. So basically, I started playing Hearthstone shortly after the release of Nax. So towards the end of 2014, a friend of mine got me into this game, and I pretty much just played casual for quite a while, and then started making Legend and just worked from there. Wanted to just keep improving myself, improving my play skills, and just go from there. And then, so at the start of last season, 2015 World Cup, I managed to get into the last call qualifier. Unfortunately, I lost in the first round. And that really just brought out the competitive spirit in me, I guess. And now I found this season just the support, it's really there. It's a great time to be in competitive Hearthstone, and I got here off of a top 50 finish in December and top 100 finish in January.
Brought out the competitive spirit in you.
Yes.
I see what you did there, man. But tell me about your preparation. Were there any specific players that helped you prepare for this event, or do you have a team that's backing you?
Yes, absolutely. Definitely have to give a shout out to my friend, my close friend, and fellow competitor, Dwayne, who I prepared this entire event with. We were pretty much just took the last week and a half and just the two of us, we were just playing games, like jamming different matchups with each other. We were practicing different lineups for Conquest, just doing a lot of game. Between the two of us, we definitely put over, I'd say, 200 games, and it was really effective. I liked it a lot, and I think it's definitely paid off.
Yeah, definitely glad to see that your hard work paid off. Well, thank you very much, Talion, for joining me for this interview. I'm super excited to see you at the Americas Championship in just a few weeks.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Well, guys, it's been a really incredibly exciting weekend here at the Americas Winter Preliminary. We've seen, Secret Paladin falter. We've seen Egg Paladin make a comeback in triumph. And I know a lot of people didn't expect that. But we now have our 8 competitors that will be competing at the Americas Winter Championship in March. Let's take a look at those 8 players. Witty Bill, who brought some interesting decks. Fibonacci, the Warrior God, Chess Dude 123, the man that made Priest and Rogue work in his lineup. Chalky, of course, glad to see him here. Amnesia, the young prodigy from Team Archon. Snail, the Tavern Hero, Al Sky High, and of course, Talion, as we just saw there. So we're set for an incredible America's Winter Championship. And if you guys want to tune into that, make sure you tune in. It's going to be broadcast on March 11th through 13th. So just a few weeks, we're going to be flying all 8 of those players out to our studios here in Burbank, California. And we're going to be putting on a great show. So make sure you tune into that. Also, don't let the action stop there. Make sure you're engaging and continuing in the conversations on social media. You can head over to facebook.com/Hearthstone, or you can use the hashtag HCT and tweet @PlayHearthstone. Tell me, who was your favorite player throughout the weekend? Who are you excited to see at the Americas Championship? Who are you disappointed to see go home? There's a lot. And also, if you missed some of the action, you could check out the VODs at youtube.com/Hearthstone. That's going to be it for us. We want to extend a huge thank you to all of you watching at home, everybody that sent us tweets in and had their tweets featured on the stream, and also a big shout out to all you guys spamming in Twitch chat. Give me one last PogChamp for the road. But from myself and from everybody here at the studios in Burbank, California, thank you guys for watching. GG, and we'll see you at the America's Championship in March.